Kush and Chemtrails, the world's most dangerous podcast.
Well, hey, you guys trip on this, bro.
Trip.
So,
take a trip.
My youngest son hits me up, bro. He's in college over on the East Coast, and he hits me up. He goes, "Hey, Dad, I don't know if this is relevant to your show, but did you know that the Nazis used to attend Malcolm X rallies?" And I was like, So I looked into it, and I found this article. It's when Malcolm X met the Nazis. It says on Sunday, June 25th, 1961, 10 members of the American Nazi Party arrived at a Nation of Islam rally in Washington, D.C. The party's founder, George Lincoln Rockwell, led them inside the Uline Arena, a 250,000 square foot stadium that would later host the Beatles' first U.S. concert. Ramrod straight, square-jawed, and with a merciless, piercing gaze, Rockwell looked like a Hollywood villain straight out of Central Casting. The U-Line had nearly sold out. The Nazis were outnumbered 800 to 1. Damn. So there's 8,000 Nation of Islam, and there's 10 of these dudes.
What do you say?
So check it out. The fascists hadn't come to make a bloody last stand. Instead, guards from the Fruit of Islam frisked the men and ushered them to front row center seats. Their crisp brown shirt costumes and swastika armbands.
Chris Brown.
That's what I heard of.
Chris Brown.
Chris Breezy.
That's awesome. See, Breezy stood out against the suits and ties surrounding them. Despite the 90-degree heat, Rockwell and his men waited hours for the event's main attraction. The night's keynote speaker, Elijah Muhammad, canceled his appearance because of an illness. Malcolm X would deliver a speech followed by an appeal for donations that singled out the few Caucasians in the audience. Rockwell contributed $20. When life photographer Eve Arnold raised her camera to capture the Nazis, Rockwell, presumably alerted to her Jewish ancestry by the Muslims, allegedly rasped, "I'll make a bar of soap out of you." To which she replied, "As long as it isn't a lampshade." Imagine watching that conversation take place, bro. So, overt dislike for the Jews was something the two groups bonded over. While Rockwell pushed his hatred of Jews to frothy extremes, Elijah Muhammad backed a range of racist theories, including that the Jews had financed the slave trade. To publicly rage against Jews in the summer of '61 was offensive more than it was today, because 6,000 miles away, the Adolf Eichmann trial in Israel had captivated the world and dramatically increased coverage of Holocaust atrocities. Division of the races was another mutual bugbear. So because on one end of the spectrum, you got the white guys that want to keep them separate, and then you got the NOI, they want to keep them separate. They come together, and they start pushing each other's agenda, and they're backing each other. So Malcolm X's speech that night was titled "Separation or Death." Inside the arena, Rockwell told reporters, "I am fully in concert with their program, and I have the highest respect for Elijah Muhammad. The question of where to send America's blacks was the only quarrel with the Muslims." So the NOI wanted a piece of the United States, and they wanted to send them back to Africa. That was the only thing that they disagreed upon on that. But so then it goes on to talk about other things, and so the NOI had a history of partnerships. 6 months earlier, Elijah Muhammad sent Malcolm X to a top secret meeting with Atlanta KKK. In a throwback to Marcus Garvey's 1922 Klan summit, the two groups brokered a bizarre truce: local mosque safety in return for NOI support on racial separation. Crazy, right? So then you had Marcus Garvey doing it prior to that. We've talked about him on the show. So it's interesting to see how... have you heard of the horseshoe effect?
No.
When you have two groups or two theories, ideologies that are so radically different, if you draw a horseshoe, they're almost similar, right? You got one over here and one over here. And because both are advocating for separation of the races, then the enemy of my enemy is my friend type. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what they came to agree upon, at least on that. So they go on here to talk about what was said and different things, you know, and things like that. I just found it really interesting. Like I said, the horseshoe theory, or the horseshoe effect rather, about how ideologies that are obviously remarkably different, the NOI and the American Nazi Party, it's remarkably different, right? And even in here, when it goes on, it talks about how he looked at Rockwell, revered the NOI because of Elijah Muhammad's command and the respect and the way they presented themselves, and felt like his Nazis were more like cartoon character guys, because in order for them to go along with what he was doing, he recruited the lowest of the low. So you got a bunch of, it wasn't the same vibe. It wasn't like astute, esteemed, revered, right? It was kind of a joke what he was doing. But where they did agree upon was the separation of the races. And what's interesting about that, dude, is if you go down here, I got some notes. This is crazy. All these years later, bro, this just happened the other day. The two men who were convicted of killing Malcolm X were just exonerated, bro.
I saw that.
Right? After all these years, bro. 65. So what is that? Almost 60 years, bro?
Free Larry Hoover.
Almost 60 years, bro.
Free Larry Hoover.
Yeah. The convictions of Muhammad A. Aziz and the late Khalil Islam. And this is all the judge said. I regret that this court cannot fully undo the serious miscarriages of justice in this case and give you back the many years that were lost. Now, they paroled in the 80s, but still 20 years for something you didn't do.
Right.
And to finally have your name cleared. And the cold part about it, bro, is the guy the guy who actually claimed he did it and went down for it and is still locked up. I think he died in prison. He said these guys didn't do it. He said it on the stand, bro. They didn't have nothing to do with it. And they still got convicted of killing Malcolm X. Crazy, right?
That's
and
tough.
If you take it a step further, bro, what's real crazy, and I think you and I discussed it, was the weekend that first of all, the trajectory of the bullets that hit Malcolm X, they didn't come from up. They didn't come from down going up. It wasn't an upward direction. They were down, which means the shooters were up there. They were above them. They weren't in the crowd like they claimed they were.
So who did it?
They claim, and I've seen articles where they talk about the CIA renting out the hall where he delivered his speech the weekend of the show, and that possibly that they had set up positions like, okay, we're going to be here and there and there and there. You know what I mean? Because they triangulate their targets. There's always 3 shooters, right? They make a triangle because that's the best way to assassinate someone. That's what they did with Kennedy.
Kush and Chemtrails, the world's most dangerous podcast.